When you start seeing reality more clearly, when you begin to understand the hidden patterns behind human behavior, when you wake up spiritually, something strange happens. People start treating you differently. Not because you changed into someone worse, but because you became someone who threatens them without even trying. Stop scrolling. You need to see this. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just theory. It's a psychological phenomenon that Carl Jung spent decades documenting. And if you've ever felt like the more aware you became, the more isolated you felt, you're not imagining things. There's a deep psychological reason why spiritually awakened people accidentally trigger fear, hostility, and rejection in others. And understanding this might be the most important thing you learn today. Have you ever felt misunderstood after a major personal breakthrough? Have you noticed that the clearer you see things, the harder it becomes to connect with people who used to be close to you? Carl Jung believed that only a rare few ever discover this truth. Because acknowledging it means accepting something uncomfortable about human nature itself. I'm talking to you if you've been on a journey of self-discovery. If you've done the inner work. If you've confronted your demons, integrated your shadow, and come out the other side with clearer eyes. If you're a young professional who's realized there's more to life than what society sells you. If you're someone who's questioning everything and finding answers that make you feel alone. This video is for you. Here's what's at stake. Right now, you might be pulling back from relationships because you don't understand why people react negatively to your growth. You might be doubting yourself, wondering if you're the problem. You might even be considering dimming your light just to fit in again. But what if I told you that your experience is not only normal, but predicted by one of the greatest minds in here? Psychology. What if the discomfort you're causing isn't your fault, but a natural consequence of seeing what others refuse to see? Stay with me till the end, because the last point is something even Jung himself struggled to explain. It's about what happens when you become so aware that you can no longer participate in the collective illusion. And trust me, point number 7 is the one most people deny about themselves. Let's start with the fundamental truth that explains everything. When you wake up, you become a mirror. The first thing you need to understand is this. Spiritually awake people don't threaten others intentionally. They threaten others by simply existing. Because when you've done deep inner work, when you've faced your shadow and integrated the parts of yourself you once rejected, something shifts in how you show up in the world. You become what Jung called a differentiated perceiver. What does that mean? It means you can see through social masks. You notice the mountains, patterns. You pick up on the unspoken tensions. You sense when someone is lying to themselves. And here's the kicker. You don't even have to say anything. Your presence alone reflects back to people what they're desperately trying to avoid seeing in themselves. Think about it like this. Imagine you're at a family dinner. Everyone's playing their usual roles. Dad's pretending everything's fine. Mom's keeping the peace. Your siblings acting like they have it all figured out. And then there's you. You're not playing along anymore. You're not performing. You're just present, authentic, grounded. And suddenly, everyone feels uncomfortable around you. Why? Because your authenticity highlights their inauthenticity. Your peace highlights their inner chaos. Your clarity highlights their confusion. Jung discovered this pattern repeatedly in his clinical work. He wrote that nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on people than the unlived life reflected back to them. When someone sees in you the qualities they've rejected in themselves, whether it's honesty, vulnerability, courage, or depth, their unconscious mind has two choices. Integrate what they see, which requires painful self-examination, or attack the mirror, which is you. Most people choose option 2 without even realizing it. Have you noticed this in your own life? Have you become more authentic only to find that certain people suddenly have a problem with you? Wait until you hear point number 3. It explains why good people sometimes become your biggest critics. Shadow projection is the real threat. Here's where it gets psychological. When you're spiritually awake, you're not just seeing reality more clearly. You're also seeing other people's shadows, their unconscious patterns, their denied emotions, their repressed desires. And because you see it, even if you never mention it, they feel exposed. Jung called this shadow projection. The shadow is everything about ourselves that we've rejected. The anger we couldn't process, the fear we rationalized away, the shame we buried, the desires we judged as wrong. All of it gets pushed into the unconscious. But it doesn't disappear. It just hides. And when someone with heightened awareness comes along, that shadow gets triggered. Let me give you a modern example. Say you have a coworker who's always talking about how ambitious and driven they are. They work late, they hustle, they post about grinding on social media. But you notice something beneath the surface. You see the exhaustion, the fear of not being enough, the way they avoid being alone with their thoughts. You don't judge them for it. You actually feel compassion. But whenever you're around, they get defensive. They make passive-aggressive comments about how you're not working hard enough. They question your commitment. Why? Because your balanced approach to work, your lack of desperation, reflects back to them the truth they're running from. That all their hustle is driven by deep insecurity. You didn't attack them. You didn't criticize them. You just existed in a different way. And that was enough to trigger their shadow. Jung documented this extensively. He found that when someone's shadow is reflected through another person's clear perception, the unconscious mind attacks the mirror. The person who sees clearly gets blamed for creating the problems they're merely observing. His patients with differentiated intuition experienced this constantly. When they would gently suggest that someone seemed troubled, that person would explode at them for being negative or creating drama. When they'd express concern about obvious problems, they'd be accused of being judgmental. This isn't random. It's psychological defense. And it explains why spiritually awake people often feel like they're walking on eggshells around others. The more clearly you see, the more you become a target for projection. People will accuse you of the very things they're guilty of. They'll call you judgmental when they're the ones judging. They'll say you're negative when they're the ones in denial. They'll claim you think you're better than everyone when they're the ones feeling inferior. And here's the hardest part. You can't defend yourself without making it worse. Because trying to explain shadow projection to someone who's projecting onto you is like trying to wake someone from a dream while they're still dreaming. They can't hear you. Their defenses won't let them. Don't miss point number 5. It's about the loneliest part of spiritual awakening. Your growth makes others face their stagnation. Let's talk about something nobody wants to admit. When you transform, when you heal, grow, the people around you feel it. And for some of them, your growth is a direct confrontation with their stagnation. Think about it. You used to complain about your job together. You used to bond over shared frustrations. You used to enable each other's victim mentality. But now you've done the work. You've taken responsibility for your life. You've stopped blaming circumstances and started creating change. And suddenly, those old friends don't know how to relate to you anymore. Here's a real scenario. You and your best friend since college used to spend every weekend complaining about relationships. You'd analyze why men are trash, or why women are complicated. You'd share dating horror stories. You'd validate each other's cynicism. But then you did some serious inner work. You recognized your patterns. You healed your attachment wounds. You stopped attracting the same toxic dynamics. And now when your friend starts the familiar complaints, you can't participate anymore. You offer a different perspective. You suggest that maybe the common denominator is internal. And suddenly, you're the enemy. You're the one who's changed. You're the one who thinks they're too good now. What happened? Your growth became a mirror that they showed your friends something they weren't ready to see. That they could change too. That they have power over their patterns. That staying stuck is a choice. And facing that truth is terrifying because it means taking responsibility. Jung understood this deeply. He wrote that the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. Your awakening forces others to confront this truth. That their suffering isn't just happening to them. It's coming from unconscious patterns they haven't addressed. And most people aren't ready for that level of responsibility. So instead of looking inward, they look at you with resentment. Your transformation reminds them of their own potential. And that reminder feels like judgment, even when you're not judging at all. It's like when someone starts eating healthy and working out, and suddenly their overweight friends feel offended by their presence. The person didn't say anything about anyone else's body, but their choice to change creates discomfort in those who haven't made that choice. This is why spiritual awakening often comes with a painful pruning of relationships. It's not that you're better than anyone. It's that you're operating at a different frequency. And sometimes, frequencies don't match anymore. Have you lost friends during your awakening journey? Comment below. Because you're not alone in this experience. The next point is crucial. It's about the words you can't say anymore. You stop playing the social game. Here's something that happens as you wake up spiritually. You lose your ability to engage in superficial conversations. Small talk becomes almost painful. Gossip feels toxic. Pretending to care about things that don't matter exhausts you. And this makes people uncomfortable because social bonds are built on these very things. Think about typical workplace conversations. Who's dating who? What everyone wore to the party. The latest drama on some reality show. The weather. Traffic. Sports scores. For most people, this is how they connect. It's the social glue. But when you're awakening, these conversations feel hollow. Not because you think you're above them, but because your consciousness has expanded to care about deeper things. Meaning, 1. Purpose. Truth. Growth. Thought. Connection that goes beyond surface pleasures. So you withdraw. Not arrogantly, but naturally. And people notice. They interpret your lack of participation as snobbery. They think you're judging them for caring about normal things. They feel rejected. And in their discomfort, they start excluding you. The invitations stop. The inside jokes happen without you. You become the outsider simply because you can't fake interest anymore. Jung called this the process of individuation. It's when you start becoming your own person rather than just another member of the collective. And it's isolating. Jung himself experienced this throughout his life. He wrote about how his whole deeper understanding of the psyche made him feel fundamentally alone because so few people could meet him at that depth. But here's what makes it worse. Sometimes you try to share what you're learning. You try to explain the concepts that fascinate you. Shadow work. Synchronicity. The collective unconscious. Non-dualistic thinking. And people look at you like you're speaking another language. Or worse, they dismiss it as nonsense. As woo. As you going through a weird phase. Modern example. You're at happy hour with coworkers. Someone asks what you did over the weekend. You mention a meditation retreat. Immediately, the energy shifts. Someone makes a joke. Someone else changes the subject. Someone asks if you're okay, like meditation is a sign of crisis. They can't hold space for the fact that you're actively working on yourself in ways that go beyond gym memberships and skincare routines. Because if they validated your journey, they'd have to question why they're not on one themselves. This is the social game you can no longer play. The game of pretending that everything is fine. That we're all just working and dating and consuming and dying without asking deeper questions. That life is just about success and comfort and fitting in. You've seen through it. And once you see through it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to playing along. And that scares people. Because if you're not playing the game, you're implying the game is meaningless. And they've invested their whole identity in winning it. Point 7 is coming up. It's the hardest truth to accept about what happens when you see too much. You become dangerous to their illusions. Let's go deeper. Every person operates within a web of illusions. Beliefs about themselves. Stories about why their life is the way it is. Justifications for their choices. Rationalizations for their behaviors. These illusions aren't always negative. Sometimes they're necessary for survival. But they're still illusions. And spiritually awake people have a tendency to disrupt these illusions simply by living differently. Here's what I mean. Someone believes they're stuck in their career because of the economy, their boss, their lack of opportunities. They've told this story so many times it's become their identity. Then they meet you. And you've completely changed careers. You took a risk. You invested in yourself. You created the opportunity you wanted. And now, just by existing, you've shattered their illusion that change is impossible. You didn't mean to. You didn't lecture them. You just lived your truth. But that truth is a threat to their comfortable story of victimhood. Or consider relationships. Someone believes they're single because the good ones are taken. Because dating apps don't work. Because people don't value commitment anymore. These beliefs protect them from the scarier truth that maybe they're choosing unavailable people. Maybe they're self-sabotaging. Maybe they need to heal before they can attract a healthy relationship. Then you show up, having done exactly that work. Having broken your patterns. Having attracted a conscious partnership. And suddenly, you're a walking contradiction to their belief system. Jung understood that people are deeply invested in their neuroses. Because neuroses, as painful as they are, provide certainty. They explain why life isn't working. They remove responsibility. They create a predictable narrative. When someone like you comes along and demonstrates that another way is possible, you're not offering hope. You're threatening their entire worldview. And humans will defend their worldview with incredible ferocity, even when that worldview is making them miserable. Because the known misery feels safer than the unknown possibility. Your awakening challenges them to consider that their suffering is optional, that their limitations are self-imposed, that they have more power than they've been willing to claim. And that consideration is terrifying. So they'll find reasons to dismiss you. You're lucky. You're privileged. You don't understand their situation. You've changed in a bad way. You're not as grounded as you think. Anything to avoid the uncomfortable. Truth that if you could transform, they could too. And they'd have to give up their comfortable excuses. This is why awakened people often feel gaslit. They're living proof that change is possible, but everyone around them insists change is impossible. They're experiencing a reality that others refuse to acknowledge exists. And that cognitive dissonance is maddening. Have you noticed this pattern? Where your growth seems to trigger defensive reactions in others. Drop a comment if this resonates. We're about to hit the most intense point. Number 8 will explain why some people can't handle your energy at all. Your presence activates their unconscious. This is where it gets really psychological. Jung discovered that when you're in the presence of someone who's done deep inner work, your unconscious gets activated. All the stuff you've been repressing starts bubbling up. And most people don't have the tools to handle that activation. So they blame the person who triggered it. Let me explain this through a story. Jung had a patient who complained that every time they were around a certain friend, they felt angry for no reason. The friend wasn't doing anything wrong, wasn't saying anything offensive, but just being near That made this patient irritable and critical. Jung helped them understand that this friend had integrated parts of themselves that the patient had rejected. The friend was comfortable with their ambition. The patient had suppressed theirs because they were taught ambition was selfish. So being around the friend activated the patient's repressed ambition, and it came out as anger. This happens with spiritually awake people all the time. Your integrated presence activates other people's unintegrated content. If you've made peace with your sexuality, you might trigger someone who's repressing theirs. If you've embraced your creativity, you might activate someone who abandoned their artistic dreams. If you've found your authentic voice, you might disturb someone who's still performing for approval. And here's the tricky part. The activation feels like your fault to them. They genuinely believe you're doing something wrong. That you're too intense. Too much. Too honest. Too deep. Too weird. But what they're really experiencing is their own unconscious material rising to the surface. And they don't know how to process it. So they project it onto you and ask you to change. Modern example. You start speaking more authentically about your struggles. You share on social media about your mental health journey, about your therapy breakthroughs, about the hard truths you faced, and someone comments that you're oversharing, that you're attention-seeking, that you should keep private things private. But what's really happening? Your vulnerability is activating their shame about their own struggles. Your openness is confronting their fear of being seen. Your authenticity is highlighting their mask. And instead of dealing with their discomfort, they try to silence you. Jung called this the animation of the psychic atmosphere. When you're operating from an awakened state, you literally change the energy in a room. You bring the unconscious to the surface. And people either rise to meet that energy, or they resist it with everything they have. This is why some people say you've changed and they don't like it. You haven't necessarily become worse. You've become more real. And real is uncomfortable for people still hiding behind personas. The next point is the real game changer. It's what Jung believed was the ultimate challenge of spiritual awakening. You stand outside the collective. Here's the deepest truth. As you awaken, spiritually, you begin to individuate. Jung's term for becoming your own person, separate from the collective identity. And the collective doesn't like individuals. The collective wants conformity. It wants everyone following the same script, wanting the same things, fearing the same consequences. And when you step outside that script, you become a threat to the entire system. Think about what society tells us we should want. A good job, a nice house, an attractive partner, kids, a respectable reputation, financial security, comfortable retirement. There's nothing wrong with wanting these things. But when you wake up, you start asking deeper questions. Why do I want these things? Are they truly mine, or were they programmed into me? What would I want if I weren't afraid of judgment? What does my soul actually long for? And sometimes, the answers don't match the script. Maybe you realize you don't want kids. Maybe you'd rather live simply and travel than climb the corporate ladder. Maybe you value experiences over possessions. Maybe you're called to an unconventional path. And the moment you start living that truth, you become dangerous. Not because you're judging others for following the script, but because your existence proves the script is optional. Jung experienced this his entire professional life. He broke from Freud, his mentor and the father of psychoanalysis, because he couldn't conform to Freudian doctrine. He explored spirituality, alchemy, Eastern philosophy, concepts that the scientific community dismissed. He followed his inner truth, even when it cost him professionally. And he paid the price. Isolation, criticism, being labeled as unscientific or mystical. But he also discovered depths of the psyche that transforms psychology forever. When you individuate, when you become truly yourself, You're implicitly questioning everyone who hasn't. Your unconventional choices suggest that convention itself is a choice. Your rejection of certain values implies those values are subjective. Your authentic life path reveals that the mainstream path isn't the only path. And for people deeply invested in the collective narrative, your individuality feels like an attack. Real-world example. Everyone in your family has followed a similar trajectory. College, career, marriage, house in the suburbs. You love your family, but you realize that path doesn't resonate with your soul. So you choose differently. Maybe you become a digital nomad. Maybe you pursue art instead of a stable career. Maybe you opt out of traditional relationship structures. And your family freaks out. They worry about you. They question your choices. They bring up practical concerns. But underneath all of that is a deeper discomfort. You've broken the pattern. You've stepped outside the family script. And that challenges their assumption that the script is right. Jung wrote that individuation requires self-sufficiency, independence of mind, and the ability to stand apart from the crowd. But he also acknowledged that this comes with profound loneliness. Because you can see what the collective can't see. You understand what they refuse to understand. And you can't go back to not knowing. This is where many people get stuck. They've awakened. They've individuated. But the isolation becomes too painful. So, they try to go back. They try to fit in again. But you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you've learned. The only way forward is through, into deeper authenticity, into stronger selfhood, into the courage to stand alone if necessary. This is the ultimate threat that spiritually awake people pose. They prove that it's possible to live outside the matrix. And once you know the matrix is there, you can never fully believe in it again. Have you felt this pressure to conform? To go back to sleep because it was easier? Comment and let me know. Because this is the turning point where you decide who you really want to be. We're almost at the climax. The final point is about what happens when you accept this reality and what becomes possible. The choice between truth and belonging, here's what it comes down to. When you spiritually awaken and realize you accidentally threaten others, you face a choice. Do you dim your light to make others comfortable? Or do you honor your truth, even if it means standing alone? This isn't an easy choice. Humans are wired for belonging. We're tribal creatures. Rejection activates the same pain centers in the brain as physical injury. So, when your awakening creates distance between you and the people you love, when it costs you friendships, family approval, professional opportunities, the temptation to shrink is real. And many people do shrink. They go back to playing the game. They suppress their insights. They pretend they don't see what they see. They laugh at jokes that aren't funny. They participate in conversations that bore them. They dim their authenticity to maintain connection, and part of them dies in the process. Jung was very clear about this. He said that living inauthentically, suppressing your true self to conform, leads to neurosis, depression, anxiety, a sense of meaninglessness. Because your soul knows when you're betraying it, and it will make you miserable until you stop. But here's what happens when you make the other choice. When you decide that your truth matters more than others' comfort. When you stop apologizing for your growth. When you accept that some people won't come with you on this journey. Something powerful unfolds. First, you stop attracting your old patterns, because you're no longer vibrating at that frequency. The people who were threatened by your growth naturally fall away, and space opens up for new connections. People who are also awake. People who celebrate your authenticity instead of fearing it. People who can meet you at depth. These connections are rarer, but they're real. And one real connection is worth 100 superficial ones. Second, You become a beacon for others who are ready to wake up. Because seeing someone living authentically, despite the social cost, gives others permission to do the same. You become what Jung called an individuated perceiver, someone who can help others navigate their own awakening. Not by preaching or teaching, but simply by being an example of what's possible. Third, you discover an inner stability that no external validation can give you. Because when you've chosen truth over belonging, when you've stood alone and survived, you realize you don't need anyone's approval to exist. You become self-sufficient in the deepest sense. You find what Jung called the self, the organizing center of your psyche, the indestructible foundation of your being. Let me tell you what this looks like practically. You stop checking your phone for validation. You stop overthinking every conversation. You stop worrying about who likes you and who doesn't. You speak your mind, truth, and let the chips fall. You make choices based on your inner compass, not external expectations. You feel lonely sometimes, yes, but you don't feel lost, because you know who you are. And here's the paradox Jung pointed out. When you stop needing people, you become more capable of genuine connection, because you're not using relationships to fill a void. You're not performing to earn love. You're just present, authentic, whole, and that attracts other whole people. This is the path Jung walked. This is the path every awakened person must walk. It's not easy. It will cost you. But the alternative, spending your life pretending to be someone you're not, costs more. So here's my challenge to you. If you've recognized yourself in this video, if you've felt the isolation that comes with seeing what others don't, if you've been tempted to shrink back down to make others comfortable, I'm asking you to choose differently. Choose truth. Choose authenticity. Choose growth, even when it's lonely. Because the world doesn't need more people playing small. It needs people like you. People who've done the work. People who see clearly. People who aren't afraid to live differently. Yes, you'll threaten others, but not because you're doing anything wrong. Because you're doing something right. You're living in alignment with your soul. And that alignment is so rare, so powerful, that it disrupts the collective sleep. Jung said the soul doesn't want to be healed. It wants to be heard. Your soul has been speaking to you this whole time, through your dissatisfaction with superficiality, through your hunger for meaning, through your inability to pretend anymore. It's been calling you to this awakened state. And now that you're here, don't betray it by going back to sleep. The people who are supposed to be in your life will find you. The ones who can handle your light. The ones who are ready for depth. Trust that. In the meantime, be okay with standing alone. Be okay with being misunderstood. Be okay with threatening others simply by being yourself. Because in the end, Jung believed that individuated people serve a crucial function for humanity. They see what the collective isn't ready to see yet. They prepare the way for collective consciousness to evolve. They make the unconscious conscious. And even if it's lonely, even if it's hard, it's the most important work there is. So if these signs felt familiar, if you nodded along to most of what I shared, know this. You don't just think differently. You are different. Jung believed minds like yours are meant to lead, not follow. Not lead in the traditional sense of power and control, but led in the sense of showing what's possible, of lighting the path for others still stumbling in the dark. And that's your purpose. Not to make everyone comfortable. Not to fit in. Not to be liked by people who are still asleep. Your purpose is to be awake. Fully. Unapologetically. Courageously. And let your awakening ripple out into the world. Tell me in the comments, which point spoke to you most? Was it the shadow projection? The loss of ability to play the social game? The isolation that comes with individuation? I want to hear your story. Because your journey matters. Your awakening matters. And you're not alone in this, even when it feels like you are. If you want more deep insights like this, more exploration of Jung's wisdom, more validation for your unconventional path, hit that subscribe button. Because your journey of self-discovery has just begun. And I'm here to walk it with you. Remember what Jung said. To know yourself is the beginning of wisdom. But with such depth comes loneliness, because so few can journey with you. So find those few. Honor your truth. Stand in your light. And stop apologizing for being awake in a world that's still dreaming. You're not the problem. You never were. You're just seeing what they can't see yet. And someday, maybe they'll thank you for holding that vision. For not giving up on truth. For being brave enough to threaten the illusions. Because that's what spiritually awake people do. Not to harm, but to heal. Not to divide, but to reveal what's already there, waiting to be integrated. Keep going. Stay awake. And trust that every person you've lost, every connection that's faded, every moment of isolation, it's all been preparing you for something bigger. For a life of radical authenticity. For relationships of genuine depth. For a sense of self that no one can take from you. This is your path. Walk it with your head high. Because threatening others with your light is not a bug. It's a feature. It's proof that you're doing something so real, so powerful, that it can't help but disturb the comfortable lies people tell themselves. And in that disturbance, in that discomfort, lies the seed of their own awakening. So, keep shining, keep seeing, keep being. Oh, the world needs you exactly as you are. Awake, aware, and unafraid too. Stand in your truth, no matter who it threatens.